So our next speaker is Dr. Wilfried Ehrmann. He's a psychotherapist working with clients and groups since 1987 and based in Vienna, Austria. He's trained in person-centered counseling, breathwork, bodywork, systemic constellation work, and peak states therapy. He's the main trainer of the ATMAN-Trainingsproject for Integrative Breathwork and the author of around 120 articles on breathwork and breath therapy. He's got a number of books, including The Evolution of Consciousness, Coherent Breathing, and a few others in German that I probably can't pronounce very well. So thank you for being here, Wilfried. Looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much. So it's quite a surprise that I'm on this prestigious panel of speakers, because I'm not part of any research team in the peak states work. And I'm not really up to date about all the things that happen in this great institute, but I use techniques from peak states work which I have learned, and I highly appreciate the work that is being done. And I had a talk with Grant some months ago about a client who had contacted me and to whom I had taught some peak states processes. And at this talk, Grant invited me to give a talk this evening. And although I said I cannot add anything new to the field of psychoimmunology, I said I could do a talk on the topic of shame, because this is my recent book. And for this book, I have collected a lot of work, and it's an interesting subject, I think, for any therapist working with, because shame is a feeling that's undercurrent under many other issues people have and people come to therapy. One of the key discoveries I made for myself is the basic function of the feeling of shame. It can be paralleled to the feeling of anxiety or fear. Now, we experience as humans fear when our individual survival is at risk. So when something threatens us and risks to kill our organism, then we react with fear. But as humans, we're always also dependent on social connection for our survival. And shame, the feeling of shame, is the indicator for all feelings, for all threats that come, for all the dangers that come to our social survival. So social survival is equally important and crucial for our survival as the survival of our organism, because our organism in the early times cannot survive without social support and assistance and caring. So shame tells us when the social system we are part of is distorted, and some of our behavior has caused some disturbance and some interruption of the connections which are vital and important for us. So, and this is why shame is involved in so many areas of our social interaction. And this is why there are so many forms and aspects to the feeling of shame. What I have, often we think, well, when we look at small children, age of 2 or 3, we notice that they start to react with the signs of shame when they have done something wrong, when they have for instance, hurt someone else, or when they have broken something which is important to other people, they would put their eyes down, maybe their face would turn red, and so on. And so most people think that the feeling of shame comes up at that age. Yet, I think that the feeling of shame is already present at the very beginning of our individual life. And so I also started to investigate the history of shame in the prenatal phase of our development. And this is, as far as I can see, and as far as I have an overview of things that have been written in this area, a rather new area to investigate and to explore. Because shame must have roots way back into the origins of our being, due to the fact that this life is always happens in a field of social relationships. So the moment of our conception is initiated by two people, of course, our parents, father and mother, and their interaction, and they create a social field where we are born into. And the emotional tone, the emotional issues that are there in this encounter do a lot to form the emotional tone with which we are conceived, or the field in which we are conceived and come to this plane as new individual beings. When our parents, for instance, have sex, connected with the feeling of fear around conception. So they do not want to get pregnant, and pregnancy happens in that moment, but nobody else knows except this little fertilized egg in the womb of the mother. And now, this is not just a fear that is at the origin of the being, but also a shame, a feeling of shame, because the little organism thinks that it is not okay, that it causes a burden and a problem for the people around. And the feeling of not having the right to exist is a feeling of shame. And when it happens so early, we can call it a primordial shame, a basic shame, which then diminishes the sense of life and the feeling of self-worth for a whole life, if not treated in therapy. So a person for which the beginning of life is in uncertain circumstances, like parents not being sure or being afraid of getting pregnant, have a deep sense of insecurity rooted in their psyche. And because we need a feeling of welcome, an unconditional welcome, to feel safe when we come into existence. Otherwise, our existence at the beginning is compromised, is somehow broken or overshadowed. Even if the parents are in favor of receiving a child, are okay with becoming pregnant as father and mother, there can be other problems. I had clients who had a problem with his parents disapproving, with his parents disapproving about the relationship they had. And so they could receive the child, but in a field of that they were shamed by the people around, parents, or even the smaller society of a village, where this couple which was not married was disrespected by everybody and pointed at. And this person then later in life, although being a very sincere and committed worker, doing his job, wanting to earn money, etc. Well, he got into debts through a marriage, which he had to divorce. And then he took money out of the firm he worked with secretly. And so it was a kind of fraud, and which did not totally fit into his personality. But in therapy, he found out that it was this early disapproval of his existence, which unconsciously he had to reproduce in this criminal behavior. So to prove that he is not worth existing as a normal member of society. So all the, we can move on, because there are other developmental events in the time of pregnancy, in the prenatal phase, which can have to do with shame. And this is just to give you examples after example to understand the impact of shame on our experience of life, on our behavioral patterns, on our emotional patterns, and that of our clients. One thing which is rarely mentioned, but I think is a very crucial moment, is the first egg division, which happens around 20 to 24 hours after conception. So this cell, which has formed in the combination of sperm cell and egg cell, now has to divide itself into two identical cells in order to grow. Now, around 70 to 80% of eggs don't survive this first cell division. This is not so known, but we see from that how sensitive this early event is, which is like the start of the development of a new organism. So it can easily fail, and it's really crucial. Will these two, when these two, when this one cell now starts to separate in a quite complex process and form two identical cells out of that, will they stay together as one organism, or will they somehow get lost? So whenever we have doubts about unity, about belonging together and having our place in that, this can happen due to a trauma in this early event of first cell division. As we also know, when both cells can divide but cannot form a unity, but both of them survive, then we have identical twins. Yeah, and I come later to the issue of twins, if we, yeah. So see how we move on. Let's move on to the to one of the next steps. That's nidation. When the fetus, as it's called now, leaves the leaves the channel which comes from where the fertilization took place and falls into the womb, it has to find a place. And as we know from science, but as well from inner experience, it can be quite a process to find an appropriate place where to implant, where to nidate. And when this process takes long, this can have to do with a feeling of rejection from the mother side. So like the mother side is not giving permission to plant to root in its womb. And this, of course, also creates a feeling of shame. Many people who feel homeless or who feel like not being at home or have this strong longing to come home have this kind of nidation trauma, which is always connected with a feeling of shame. And yeah, a side mention is that when there is the trauma, there's always an aspect of shame, not only for having a trauma, but also included in the trauma event itself. One example is the famous composer Ludwig van Beethoven, who had around, during his stay in Vienna, where he spent the most time of his grown-up life, around 40 places where he lived. So he moved every now and then from one place to the other because something didn't work. And this looks like the journey of an fetus in the womb searching for a place to nidate. Another crucial event in prenatal development is the moment when the parents get to know about the pregnancy. This can be a moment of joy for the parents, or it can be a moment of despair and unhappiness and misery and all different feelings of which then give the fetus the feeling, I'm not welcomed, I should not be there. Often, and this also can be even found in ultrasonic research, the embryo hides somewhere in the back of the womb so that it somehow cannot be seen. So then there is an issue which many clients come with, whether they know or whether they don't know. That is the issue of the lost twin. That is when two twins come into existence, and one of them dies during the early phases of pregnancy. With this event, a lot of forms of shame are involved, but one basic form is the shame of those who survive. We know this form also from other contexts, like Holocaust survivors often suffer from massive shame that they have survived, whereas their family and friends had to die. And they don't understand why they have survived. And this is often the cause of suicide in these cases. And besides, I think suicide is mainly motivated by shame, and often by this primordial form of shame, by this prenatally formed feeling of shame, which tells you it's a burden for others to be alive. My existence is a nuisance and is impeding the life of my parents, so I should go away. And suicide is like following this command of shame. Then another issue is about wrong sex, when parents are determined or are looking forward or are expecting the gender of the child, which is not the actual gender. So if they want a boy but it's a girl, or if they want a girl and it's a boy, this also gives a deep imprint on the persona and the psyche of this child, which is coming and which is developing in the womb, and which knows I'm not meeting the expectations of my parents, and I cannot. It's impossible. I am a boy, but they don't want me as a boy, they want me as a girl. So it's like then the moment of birth, in times when there was no ultrasonic detection of the gender of the child, or the moment this method is applied, that then the shame comes up, like saying, oh, I'm so sorry, but I am wrong. There's something basic wrong about me, and I cannot change it. And these are these moments of shame, which also then can cause severe issues with one's own sexual orientation or gender identification later in life. Yeah, and the issue of expectations is even larger, like parents expecting, often unconsciously, from the child to perform better in life as they have done, or to follow in their footsteps. And as we think when we experience prenatal therapy, that these expectations already work in this early age and are implanted in the psyche of the developing child, and then form a pattern later in life, which always has to go meeting expectations, doing something just to follow up to this what other people want from one, and losing the sense of what they really want for themselves, which causes a lot of conflicts. Like they then do studies which they are not interested in and fail, etc. So yeah, there is a lot of things still to talk about, but maybe we have a few minutes left, so if there are any questions, we could handle them.
Yes. So one of the questions was, how would you define the difference between shame and guilt?
Oh, well, yeah, shame, in my view, is the deeper feeling. That's a deeper feeling of inadequacy, like as a whole being, whereas guilt has to do with behavior, something that I have done wrong. And with guilt, it's usually that we know what we can do to eliminate the guilt. Like, I'm guilty when I have stolen money and I can return the money. Then the guilt is resolved. But with shame, it's a lot more difficult. We cannot do anything about it. We are dependent on others to relieve us from our shame. So guilt is much more mentally, and it can be easily accessed and also more easily handled. But the underlying shame, which is always in guilt, is not so easy to handle. And there is shame without guilt. That's my view on that.